for supporting multilingual learners in garden education, and then use that to tease apart some of the strategies. We'll demonstrate lessons and then use that as a chance to kind of tease apart some of the strategies that can best support students who have a different primary language than the language of instruction. And we'll have a chance to kind of apply that, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. Oh, John, have you hit record? Will you do that? Just so folks know, if you have questions throughout the presentation, John will you can type those into the chat and John will keep kind of track of those. And then if there's time at the end, we'll take some time to answer people's questions. And also we have some questions at the end that we noted from your registrations. So if you put that already into the registration, we have that noted at the end so that we'll have some time to discuss those. All right, so I'll introduce myself first. So again, my name is Whitney, and I want to tell you a little bit about my background and experience with language learning so that you know kind of what I'm bringing to this and where I'm coming from. So I guess for me, I began learning a second language when I began learning Spanish in school, in middle school and high school and college. And then I applied that when I went to live in Latin America for about a year and a half during my college years I spent in different countries in Latin America. And so I got firsthand experience of living in a country and trying to learn the language while living there and going to school there, etc. And it was also in Latin America that I began volunteering in schools and discovered a love of teaching. And so that was many, many years ago. When I came back, I became an environmental educator here in the States. And because I, at that time, knew a lot of Spanish, I was often given groups of students that had lots of home languages because I could translate at least into Spanish. And so I often had groups of students who had lots of different home languages. And I was so committed at that time, and I still am, to student-centered instruction and teaching through inquiry and helping students, inspiring their curiosity and things like that. And so I would always want to have these discussions and open-ended questions. But sometimes those efforts on my part really fell flat with my students. And I realized that I needed strategies to make sure that I didn't, if I asked a question like, where do you think these trees get their nutrients? I would just hear from a couple of students, and like these rapid responders, and a lot of students were just hanging back. And I wanted to find ways to kind of get more equity of participation in my instruction. And after that, I became a classroom teacher, and I actually got a bilingual, cross-cultural, language-focused credential, and I student taught in a bilingual 5th grade classroom here in Watsonville, California. And so we taught all subjects in English and Spanish. Like when we were doing fractions, we would do that in Spanish, or if we were doing photosynthesis, like everything we taught would be Monday English, Tuesday Spanish, etc. And then from there, I became a middle school science teacher in a school where all instruction was in English. And what I found when I became a middle school science teacher is so many teachers would say, when we talked about hands-on student-centered instruction, they'd be like, oh, I love that. It's so great that you want to do a school garden or you want to adopt a watershed, but my students really aren't ready for that. They're not even speaking English yet. And I really believe and know that, especially because I had the experience teaching in a bilingual school, those students are absolutely ready. They're just as ready as the fluent English speakers. They're just ready in a different language. And so I became really focused on what are the strategies we can use to build equitable participation for students who have different levels of proficiency in the language of instruction, whilst that allow us to still have success with hands-on, interactive, student-centered pedagogy. And so that's what I'm really gonna try to share today, is strategies that can work for students across different language spectrums when we wanna engage them in really engaging, exciting hands-on learning, particularly in a garden setting. So that's a little of my background and where I'm coming from. And now I'm the education director at LifeLab, and at LifeLab I focus primarily on doing trainings and workshops with adult educators across the country on garden-based learning. Daniela.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to talk about my background a little bit, and first I want to talk about my background as an English language learner back in Mexico. So I started learning English as a kid when I was 7 years old, as I switched to a bilingual school. And the transition was not easy. At the beginning, I did not understand most of what was said by the English teachers who taught us for half of the school day. At this time, my fellow schoolmates were really, really supportive, and they helped me understand a lot of what I was not understanding. And also, I was lucky enough to have a teacher with whom we did lots of interactive activities, such as singing as a group. We did water filtering experiments with bottles and rocks. And we did learn the times tables by moving around the classroom floor tiles. So all of this helped me very much to actually participate, learn, and have a smoother transition while I got used to the language. And then sometime after I got my psychology degree in Mexico, I discovered school gardens. And from that moment, I was hooked. So I began working as a volunteer at a school garden. And then I was an assistant to the teacher. And finally, I was a teacher responsible for the program. So when I was a teacher back in Mexico, I taught in Spanish. And throughout my teaching experience, I did have about 3 or 4 students who had moved to Mexico City from different countries, and they didn't understand or spoke any Spanish. So I found that the lessons in the garden were so interactive and engaging. Now that I've been thinking about it, now that I've been talking about it with Whitney, and I've been reflecting upon this. And language didn't really seem to be a major barrier in this case. So even if my students did not understand 100% of what was being said, all kids, regardless of their mother language, would be really experiencing what roots looked, smelled, felt, and tasted like, or what nutrient cycles were, just by working on the compost and seeing, feeling, and smelling all the changes happening, and also singing about it. So since the beginning of my teaching, LifeLab was a very important part when I was back in Mexico as a teacher. All the resources available were a great support for my lessons, as well as the workshops and volunteer work that I did when I visited LifeLab. So I actually took some workshops with Whitney, with John, and that's when we met here at LifeLab. I started working as a bilingual garden educator here at LifeLab 10 months ago. And most of the work that I've been doing this year has taken part on the Partner Schools program with Pajaro Valley Schools here in California. And in this program, we work with many English language learners who bring a cultural and language diversity and wealth to all of our programs.
Thanks, Daniela. And so now we'd like to do a poll, and John's going to administer this poll because we'd love to just kind of find out a little bit about who all of you are. So take a moment to check your boxes in the polls, and then we'll show the results and see who we have here with us today.
And there are 3 questions in the poll, so you might need to scroll down to see them all. And Whitney, I'm not sure exactly how you're viewing this right now, but I will in a while end it.
Should I stop screen sharing so that you can show the results? Probably.
Yeah, I'll end the poll and share results. Seems like 85% of the people have voted. And we're getting close. When we hit in the mid 90s, once it starts slowing down, this is like popcorn. A lot of the kernels have stopped popping. It might be time to turn this over. Okay, it's slowing down enough. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And
great.
I believe you should be able to see it. Chat if you don't see the questions.
Thanks, John. So it looks like we have the most school garden educators, but also some classroom teachers and other educators and a few non-educators who also support this work. And a broad range of how many English learners folks are teaching across the board. Great. Just for your reference, in the United States, about 1 in 10 students is an English learner, and here in California, it's 1/4, 25%. So great. And most of you are teaching remotely, and some are in person and hybrid. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. All right, let's see, share screen. Here we go. So let's dive into this. So there are really kind of two categories of strategies that that we see a lot of in trying to support students with a different primary language than the language of instruction. One is translation, and Daniela spoke to that beautifully. This was such an opportunity for Life Lab almost a year ago now, when Daniela is actually the first person we got to hire as a bilingual educator. We've had bilingual staff in the past, but this was a position where we specifically recruited for a bilingual educator, which is really exciting. And it makes a lot of sense in a context like ours, because in our partner schools, 67% of the students across that entire district are English learners, and in our partner schools, it's even higher. And of those, I would say about 99% of those students, their primary language is Spanish. So in our context, we have a lot of Spanish speakers. And so we're able to provide direct translation through bilingual educators, or as you see on the slide, bilingual handouts, so bilingual instruction, bilingual curriculum, etc. Translation is fantastic when you can provide it. And of course, there are some limits. For example, in a lot of districts, you might have dozens of primary languages, with students from all around the world, all in one district. And so it can be really challenging resource-wise to be able to translate everything into all of those languages. In addition, you're almost always going to have a lot of students who have potentially intermediate English. So they have some English and they're looking to develop more. And so in addition to translation, it's not one or the other, but in addition to translation, another key strategy is scaffolding. And scaffolding, when I say the word scaffolding, you might imagine like the scaffolding on a building. It's a similar idea. It's support structures that allow students to engage and comprehend and participate in a lesson with supports that help them onboard and get involved, even if their language is, even if they're not entirely fluent in the language of instruction. So that's where we're really going to focus today, is on scaffolding. What are the strategies if you're teaching, in our case here in the States, if you're teaching in English, but your students have a real big variety of levels with English, what strategies can you use to support their participation in the lesson? So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to teach you a garden education lesson, and I'm going to do it twice. The first time I'm going to do it without scaffolding, and then we're going to debrief that to just get a sense of what is that like for students when they're taught in a different language and there's no supports. And then we're going to do the same topic, the same lesson with scaffolding, and we're going to use that to tease apart the specific strategies that can be helpful. And then we're going to have a chance to apply that to our own lessons. So without further ado, I'm going to teach you a lesson. This one's only going to be about a minute long, just so you know, without scaffolding. But what I didn't tell you is I'm going to teach the whole thing in Spanish. So a couple of disclaimers, or one disclaimer. My Spanish is not perfect. So for those of you who are fluent Spanish speakers, I apologize in advance. Fortunately, it's not the point of today. I'm not teaching you Spanish. I'm just giving an experience of a lesson. So I'll do my best with my Spanish, but the idea of this is for you to participate as students in a lesson and see what that feels like. Are we ready? All right, just put on your third grade hat. You're now, or your first grade hat. You're now a first grader in my garden lesson. Take one, no scaffolding. Hola clase. Hoy vamos a hablar sobre las plantas, y las plantas son muy importantes porque tienen muchas estructuras que les ayudan en sobrevivir. Por ejemplo, las plantas tienen raíces. ¿Alguien sabe qué hacen las raíces para la planta? ¿Hay un voluntario que sabe? ¿Nadie sabe? Muy bien, no hay problema. Las raíces toman el agua del suelo para que la planta pueda crecer. ¿Qué otras estructuras tienen las plantas? Pues tienen tallos, y los tallos también son importantes. Okay, cut. All right, that was just to give you a sense of what a lesson without any scaffolding might feel like for different people. So what we're going to do now is debrief that lesson. And the way we're going to debrief it is we're going to go into a Jamboard. So one second, I need to put this into the chat. So I'm going to put into the chat of our, let me see if I can do this while I'm still screen sharing. Yes. Into our Zoom chat, I'm going to put a link to a Jamboard.
And
Should
Whitney,
see it there. Yeah.
Don, and I just want to see, some people are seeing your screen kind of small, and I don't know if you pressed your little green button on your browser, if it would make your screen come out bigger.
Does that do it?
There you go.
Thank you. Great. Okay. So in the chat, you should see a link to a Jamboard. And you can click on that and that'll take you to here. And I'll show you what we're gonna do. So on the left side of the Jamboard, there's this square with the little lines in it. That's a sticky note. You're gonna open up the sticky note and I just want you to write a word or phrase that describes how you felt during that lesson. So for example, maybe you felt bored during the lesson. And then you'll take your sticky note and you're gonna drag it to show what level of Spanish you have. So if you're a non-speaker of Spanish, you would put that here, or a native or proficient speaker here. So you can be anywhere in between. Like I'm between intermediate and proficient and I felt bored, would look like this. So make your Post-its, put them on the board. There'll be a lot of them because there's a lot of us, but let's just see some of the feelings that came up for folks across the spectrum.
Whitney, are you seeing most of us can't access it?
I am not. I'm seeing a bunch of Post-its going in. If you can't access it, I apologize, but can you see it on my screen? Great. So if you can't access it, feel free to type how you felt in the chat, and you can also just watch the Post-its to see how other folks felt.
We might have gone overboard on the amount of Jamboard participants.
Oh, maybe they have a limit. Yeah, could be. All right. All right. You can take a pause from the Jamboard for now, and let's just take a minute to look at how folks were feeling. So over on the non-speaker end, it sounds like folks might have felt confused, trying to understand, lost, lots of confused. Heading in toward the middle zone here, we've got trying hard to follow, lost when we got to new vocab, slightly challenged, but not entirely engaged. Felt like it was moving fast. And then all the way over to the native or proficient speakers feeling not enough time to think, had to come up with answers quickly, pressured, fine but rushed. So the point here is just to build empathy for what it might be like for our students all the way across the spectrum. You'll notice there aren't a lot of positive feelings, even for people who are fluent in the language, on this kind of monologue type of lesson. I saw in the chat, someone said, this is more like a monologue than a lesson. That's true. And this kind of instruction really isn't working for anyone across that spectrum. But in addition, I just want to highlight, I just did that for about 60 seconds. And our students might be in that situation for 6 or more hours a day. So, you can feel it when you're teaching that last block of the day sometime, right? And it's like the students are just completely done. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to put you into a breakout room, and I want you to think about this question. You're just going to have like 2 minutes together to discuss in breakout rooms. How do you think students behave when they're feeling these ways? So if students are feeling confused, bored, disengaged, lost, etc., how might that show up in their behaviors? You're going to go into a breakout room, and oh, hang on, I have to stop screen sharing to do that. John, I've lost breakout rooms. Do you have them?
Yes, I do.
All right, so John's gonna put you into breakout room. You've got just about 2 minutes. Just talk about, I'll restate the question. How do you think students behave when they feel those different ways? How might that show up? Go ahead, John.
It has started the process.
Yeah, it
Invite.
is. And anyone who stays in here, we'll just talk together.
Select your invite.
I see people going out. Where did it be next? I forgot this took so long. All right. Folks who are still in the main room with me, if you are here, if you are sitting at your computer and you're able to, I'd love if you could turn on your camera and unmute, and we can use this as our breakout room, because some computers aren't going to let you into a breakout room. So some people may have stepped away, but if you're here and you're able to unmute and put your camera on, then we'll be able to have a conversation. Hi, Sophia. All right. I'm thinking the other people are not there. John?
Yeah, they might not be.
Feel good about that? Okay, if you are in this room with me and John and you would like to discuss, we can use this as our breakout room. Just unmute yourself and we can talk about the question. Oh, now I have, oh no, I just have join breakout room. I don't have. Okay. John,
I am here. I just have my.
no problem. Hi. Oh, Erica, we're gonna, well, I guess we're meeting now, but we're gonna get to work together soon.
I'm so excited.
I'm really excited too.
Thank you. I've got my kiddo home today, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
being a little
Hi,
incognito.
buddy. I've got a kid here too who you're gonna meet in a minute. All right, well, we get a chance to talk about this. John,
Yeah.
I do want you to send the 60 seconds notice to people in like, maybe in 30 seconds. Okay?
Okay.
The close rooms, because then it gives them 60 seconds, but let's give them another 30. What do you think, Erica? How do you think students might behave when we see those feelings?
I think they'll like disengage, not participate, maybe start to like try to like get attention in a negative way, check out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with all of those things. I feel like it's easy to see both ends of the spectrum, from like really out to like really acting out, because
Totally.
like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would just start daydreaming immediately. I would just so tune out. I would daydream
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Did you close breakout rooms?
I'm going to do that right now because I feel we need to give them just a teeny bit more time, because
I
it took
know.
a while for the breakout rooms to get established. But I'll do it now, so there'll be 60 seconds for folks now.
Perfect.
All right. Well, I'm going to turn my camera off again in a bit. Thanks for doing this. It's nice to meet you. And
You
I'm
too.
working with you.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks.
So some people are sliding back in
Yep.
now. We're coming
Yep.
back up.
Folks are coming back in, and it gives them a 60-second window. So we'll wait till people come all the way in. John, you let me know when the countdown clock, when everyone's back, okay?
Yeah. We have 62 people back out of 180.
It'll pull them all back at the end of the 60 seconds. Welcome back, folks. As you're landing back here, you can head into the chat and just type in, if you'd like to, any behaviors you think you might see from students when they're feeling those different ways. So like I just did an example of maybe they'd be daydreaming. What other behaviors might we see when students are feeling lost, confused, etc.? You can type it into the chat so people can see the thinking you did. Yeah, restless, fidgeting, great. Side conversations, yeah. Yeah, watch this chat. These are great.
All the breakout rooms are officially closed now. Whitney, will we be using breakout rooms again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so 1 second. All right. Welcome back, everybody. So yeah, as I just saw you, as you populated it in the chat, absolutely. The behaviors we might see from students can run the gamut from just really checked out, disengaged, like daydreaming or just kind of off in the distance, to acting out, looking for other ways to get positive feedback because they're having a hard time getting it from the instruction and from doing well in the class. And so I just, again, start here so that we can build empathy when we see those behaviors for what students might be experiencing. So now we're going to go to the next version of the lesson, same topic, but I'm going to teach it with a bunch of scaffolding. The lesson that I'm teaching is actually written up. This comes from our Life Lab's new Next Generation Science in the Garden curriculum. We have brand new curriculum that's available for download on our website for kinder, first and second grade. And this lesson is in the first grade from Shoots to Roots unit. So a few notes before I dive into take 2 of the lesson. This is going to be a demonstration lesson, just as if you were my first grade class. So I'd love if you're able to turn on your camera, that would be great. If not, I absolutely understand. But if you are, it'll make it fun because we're going to interact a little bit. And there will be parts where I say things like repeat after me or that kind of thing. Please stay on mute. That'll just be easier logistically, but I hope you do repeat. I hope you do sing along. I hope you get all the way into the lesson, but please do stay on mute. And I also want you to know that there's going to be a volunteer in my lesson, and that's going to be my son. So in the lesson, you'll get to see my son. So with that, we're going to dive in to take 2 of this lesson. Are we ready? All right. Hola, clase. Hoy vamos a hablar sobre las plantas. Repiten, plantas.
Plantas.
Excelente. Muy bien, clase. Las plantas tienen muchas partes diferentes y vamos a aprender sobre las partes de la planta. Ahora, yo necesito un voluntario para hacerse en una planta. Muy bien, excelente, gracias, Nation. Ok, yo voy a cambiar este voluntario en una planta. Ven conmigo, aquí. Así, perfecto. Ok. Yo voy a cambiar Nation en una planta. Voy a poner el primer parte de la planta. Estas se llaman los raíces. Repiten, raíces. Muy bien, raíces. Los pongo aquí, abajo. Los raíces son, un poco atrás. Eso. Ok. Los raíces son muy importantes porque toman el agua del suelo así. Ustedes, háganlo conmigo. Muy bien. Yo como raíces. Por ejemplo, zanahoria es un raíz que como. ¿Ustedes comen raíces? ¿Sí? Favor de escribir los raíces que comen en el chat. Pueden escribirlo en español o en inglés o en cualquier idioma que saben. ¿Qué raíces comen ustedes? Muy bien, muchos raíces que comen ustedes. Excelente. Yo veo, por ejemplo, ginger. Es un raíz. ¿Alguien sabe cómo se dice eso en español? Daniela, ¿sabes cómo se dice en español?
Jengibre.
Excelente. Muchas gracias. Jengibre.
Jengibre.
Ginger. Ustedes me están ayudando con mi inglés. Ginger. Jengibre. Gracias. Muchos raíces que comemos. Ok. Ahora voy a poner la segunda parte de la planta. Esta parte se llama el tallo. Repiten, tallo.
Tallo.
Excelente, muy bien. El tallo es muy importante porque el agua entra en los raíces y tiene que subir así. Vamos a hacerlo juntos. ¿Listos? Excelente. ¿Ustedes comen tallos? Yo como tallos. Favor de escribir los tallos que comen en el chat. ¿Está bien en inglés o en español? ¿Qué tallos comen ustedes? Excelente. Muchos tallos que comemos. Muy bien. Ahora voy a poner la tercera parte de la planta. Esta parte es muy importante. Se llaman las hojas. Repiten, hojas. Repites. Hojas.
Hojas.
Excelente. Sí,
Hojas.
las hojas son importantes para la planta porque las hojas toman el luz del sol y hacen comida para la planta. Yo como hojas. ¿Ustedes comen hojas?
Yes.
¿Sí? ¿Qué hojas comen ustedes? Pueden escribirlos aquí. Las hojas que comen. Muy bien. Espinaca. Sí, lechuga. Hay algo aquí en inglés. Chard. Ah, es una hoja que comemos. Cilantro. Hojas que comemos. Oh, está bien así. Ahora voy a poner otras partes de la planta. Esta es la parte más bonita de la planta. Se llaman las
Flores.
flores. Repiten, flores.
Flores.
Excelente. Y las flores funcionan para que la planta pueda hacer dos partes más. Las frutas, repiten, frutas. Y, repites, frutas.
Frutas.
Y semillas.
Es semilla.
Muy bien, frutas y semillas. Flores, frutas y semillas ayudan a la planta en hacer plantas de bebé. Ahora, ¿ustedes comen flores? Así. ¿Ustedes comen flores?
Sí.
Flores comen
Maestra.
ustedes. Pueden escribirlo en el chat. Sí, brócoli. Sí, coliflor. Muy bien. ¿Alguien sabe cómo se dice coliflor en inglés? Cauliflower. Escuchan, flor, flower, cauliflor, cauliflower. Muy bien, alcachofa, sí. Son flores que comemos. Y todos nosotros comemos frutas, ¿verdad? Escriben las frutas que comen en el chat. Excelente, mango, pepper, apples, manzana, strawberry, fresa. Excelente. ¿Y ustedes comen semillas? Yo como semillas. Por ejemplo, hay semillas de girasol. Arroz es una semilla. Maíz, muy bien. Frijoles son semillas. A mí me gustan los burritos y los burritos tienen frijoles, tienen trigo en la tortilla. Excelente, muchas semillas que comemos. Ahora tenemos los 6 partes de la planta. Los escribo aquí. Raíces, tallos, hojas, flores, frutas, semillas. Ahora, yo voy así y ustedes van a decir la parte de la planta. ¿Listos? Vamos así.
Raíz.
Muy bien.
Tallo.
Tallo.
Excelente. Está bien. Take off mute si quieren.
Hojas.
Hojas.
Muy bien. ¿A esto?
Flores.
Flores.
Fruta.
¿Y adentro?
Semillas.
Semillas. Excelente. Un aplauso para la planta. Excelente. Ok. Ahora, ya, tú puedes poner todo aquí. Y nosotros vamos a cantar. Entonces, párense, por favor, así. Muchas gracias, Nation. Ok. Ahora vamos a cantar. Repiten. Raíces. Tallos. Hojas. Flores. Frutas. Semillas.
Semillas.
Otra vez. Raíces.
Raíces.
Tallos.
Tallos.
Hojas.
Flores.
Flores. Frutas.
Frutas.
Semillas.
Semillas.
Ahora, todos juntos. Dos. Raíces,
Raíces,
tallos, hojas, flores,
flores,
frutas, semillas.
semillas.
Raíces,
Raíces,
tallos, hojas, flores, frutas,
frutas,
semillas. ¿Podemos hacerlo más rápido?
Sí.
Yo creo que sí. Un poco más rápido. Raíz, tallos, hojas, flores, frutas. Raíces, tallos, hojas, flores, frutas y semillas. Un aplauso para todos. Excelente. Nation, tú puedes regresar a la clase. Gracias, señor. Ok. Ahora, vamos en el jardín. Y en el jardín van a buscar a las plantas. Y van a buscar a un raíz, un tallo, una hoja. Van a buscar a la planta, regresar aquí y lo vas a poner aquí para demostrar si es una hoja o un flor. Okay. And cut. All right, so that was take 2. Same lesson topic, taught in a very different way. We're going to do the same thing now where you're going to get into breakout rooms. And this time, you can talk about both questions that we talked about last time. So I want you to talk about how did you feel in that lesson? And this time, actually, this will be a different question. How did you feel? And then what strategies, you can share like what level you are with Spanish. What strategies helped you understand or engage? So in your breakout rooms, you'll have more time. This time you'll have about 5 minutes to go around and share how did it feel and what strategies helped you participate in the lesson. John, are you able to start the breakout rooms?
Yeah, I just started them.
Awesome. And you'll have about 5 minutes this time. And then we'll come back and debrief the strategies. Looks like people are still heading out, but if you are unable to go into a breakout room, we can also just debrief right in here. Actually, I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes so we know.
No one was in my breakout room. Can I get put in another one?
Yeah, I will see if you're on the unassigned list.
Yeah, I also did not get placed in one.
Okay, I'm gonna.
I did, but there was no one else in mine.
Yeah, some people are on the Zoom and not really at their computer. So I'm reassigning people that were unassigned right now.
Thanks, John. And if anybody is unable to go in, we'll just talk in here. So
There wasn't anyone in my breakout room.
maybe, John, maybe we should just, anyone who's still here, we'll just talk here.
You can just talk about what you want to talk about. I didn't want to sit in there alone.
No, exactly. Let's use this as our breakout room. So folks who are still here, how did you feel during that lesson and what strategies did you notice that helped you engage depending on your level of Spanish? Does anybody want to kick us off? You can just unmute. There's just a couple of us.
I can go. So I've never really learned Spanish formally, but I grew up in Tucson, so I've like heard a lot of Spanish. And what really helped me was the chat function where you would be like, what's a root that we eat? And you could type it in any language because I saw words obviously that I recognized in English, but also ones that I had like heard before in Spanish, but maybe not like seen spelled out. So that helped me a lot.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Other folks?
Well, the repetition was huge.
Great. Do you mean like repeat this word, repeat after me, or the repetition of like each section being similar?
Both. But the repeat after me was very helpful.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Sorry. Go on, Allison.
I was going to say I really liked the movement with the words. That's always helpful, and having it. I do speak Spanish, but being able to envision how it works for English language learners, or teaching the lesson in Spanish, and then having the English students need to adapt as well would be a cool way to do it, I think. So then, you have that cross-cultural and that they can help each other.
Great idea. And great point that even though you speak Spanish, it's more helpful. It's still helpful to you to do movements along with the words, it's helpful to everyone. And I found that also with my fluent English speakers, like, oh, these scaffolded lessons are better. It's a win-win because it's better for them too. Yeah. Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, it reminds me, I watched a lot of Sesame Street when I was a kid, and they did a lot of Spanish on Sesame Street, and it was always very involved and lots of movement and getting, I mean, it's through a television, but right, it's very similar. And the things that I learned on Sesame Street as a child, I'll never forget. And a lot of it was because I was young, but a lot of it was because of how they did it. Yeah. And there's a level of engagement of like the teacher, but also engaging with the students and using props and the singing and having them repeat after you, and this constant flow of energy that is you can't help but be engaged. It's just more fun.
Yeah, great.
And even for the Spanish speakers, the props that you used were not the actual thing, so they had to see what that fun prop was, and they had to identify it as well. And I thought, well, that's pretty clever, because they're both having to come together to take that thing as that's roots instead of a piece of a mop.
Yeah, that's a great point. Oh, John, that's our timer. Will you hit the closed breakout rooms?
Yes.
Great, thanks. And we still have probably a minute while people are coming back in.
I also really, really appreciated how much of the eating part of it that you engaged, that was incorporated into the lesson, and because that's such a huge part of what we're doing also.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because were we not on Zoom, when we do this in our real field trips, this is an introduction to a field trip where they will eat all 6 plant parts, and we make the 6 plant part burrito, and they get their lettuce leaf, and then they fill it with a root, stem, flower, fruit, and seed, and then wrap it up and eat it. And that's so hard to translate on Zoom, but I'm glad that you picked up on that, because that's really intentional that we try to use the botany with the edible part. And
right, yeah.
All right, welcome back, folks. Can you see John? I lost track. Is everybody already in, or not yet?
We have 9 more seconds.
Okay, thanks. I think I can wait. I have a lot to say, but I can probably wait 9 seconds.
Yeah, no, we only have 80 people, but they're coming fast.
Oh, I see them. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, great. Welcome back. So what I just shared with you, I'm actually going to put a link to this document in the chat. This can be your cheat sheet from now on for scaffolding strategies. So, oh, how did that happen? Hold on. Hang on one second. I just need to fix my screen share. But while I'm doing that, you can, if you click on the link in the chat, you can preview this little cheat sheet of scaffolding strategies for English language learners. Hang on one second. Sorry, my slideshow decided to change on me. Okay, here we go. Screen share. All right, so I put the link to this in the chat so that you can reference it anytime you want, also after the presentation. But essentially, these are 10 research-based components of what in teacher speak is called SDI, Specially Designed Academic Instruction in English. And so this is really targeted for intermediate English language proficiency students. But I will just say all of us probably, our classes are just entirely mixed. You might have newcomers who have absolutely very, very little English or no English, all the way up to fluent speakers all in one class. So I also think of SDI as just a great kind of reaching the most students possible. Again, ideally complemented with translation opportunities for students who really have very limited English. But these are great strategies to know about that can be incorporated into any lesson. They're certainly not unique to the 6 plant part lesson. These are for any lesson and any grade. including middle and high school, and including when you're working with adult learners. So these are the 10, and I'm going to go through them one by one and just talk a little bit about each one. So the first is kind of intuitively important, but I think really important to name, which is creating an emotionally safe learning environment. And anything we can do to make sure that our students, regardless of language level, feel comfortable, safe, welcome, will pay off 20-fold when we're trying to then teach new content. And I think this photo kind of, captures that feeling well, but some just kind of tangible things that I found to be really useful in doing this are when we ask questions, trying to go for open-ended questions rather than a one right answer question. So showing interest in the students' lives beyond just their beyond just what you're teaching. So, the kind of thing of, like, for example, when students are coming into the garden, being right at the gate to be like, hey, good morning, welcome, using their names, making eye contact, smiling, asking about, hey, does anybody want to share anything from the weekend before we start? Just sort of creating that sense of we all care about each other, we support each other, is kind of laying the groundwork. The next, now we're going to get into more content specific ones, is really having clear and simple learning goals. And so, for example, when teaching about this lesson, rather than being like, okay, I'm going to teach about plants, so like anything I've ever thought about plants is relevant. No, this is about the 6 plant parts, and that's the whole focus. That's what we're going to do the skit about, the song about. When we go in the garden and collect things, we're going to focus on that. It's like staying kind of eyes on the prize, focused on the one thing you're teaching. And around that, there's this idea of using visuals and realia to introduce new vocabulary. And realia is just kind of a teacher word for real stuff. And I love the garden because realia is the kind of thing that classroom teachers, we have to remind ourselves all the time, like, oh, we're doing fractions. I should bring in something real. I should bring in a pizza, or I should bring in little plastic bears, and we should put them in color. In the garden, we don't have to do that. The garden is full of realia. That is what the garden is. But it's just about remembering to use it. So making sure that when we're in the garden, we don't just gather everyone at the benches and talk about seeds, but we go under the sunflower and we pull the seeds right out. So using your realia, really using it to teach new vocabulary explicitly can be really helpful. Then there's connecting to prior knowledge and experience. And this is where supporting English learners merges with just generally culturally responsive teaching. This is really making sure that in any lesson, we have opportunities for students to share what they know and their experience. And so these photos demonstrate really different possibilities here. So on one, he's making a sign in English and in Spanish because that's his home language. So giving students the opportunity to share their language, whether or not you know their language. And that's where, if you have dozens of languages that your students speak, no problem. You can ask them, great, how do I say this in all of your languages? And the students can contribute that information. And then that gives them the chance to kind of step into the role of teacher, and they can be teaching you. Oh, that's how you say it in Tongan. Oh, that's how you say that in Japanese. Just welcome in their languages and their experience. And then on the right here, you'll see this photo that says ways humans travel. And this is the beginning of a lesson about how seeds travel. And it's just an example of how we can connect to students' prior knowledge. So as I mentioned, when I became an environmental educator, I would sometimes ask questions that fell flat. And that would be, for example, if I was teaching about seed dispersal, I might have said something like, who here knows about seed dispersal, or who here knows of a seed dispersal mechanism? And that question, inherently, the only hands I'm going to get are kids who have already learned this somewhere. Their parents taught them or someone taught them. They're fluent in English. They already know the content. And those are the only, how are you going to raise your hand for that question if you don't know what seed dispersal mechanisms are? And so what I've learned over time is to, rather than say like, what do you already know about the phases of the moon? Instead of that, I kind of think of a question where everyone will have an experience with it, and then we can relate it to our topic. So when we're talking about how seeds travel, now our opening question is, let's talk about travel. What are all the ways that humans can travel? And they do a little pair share, and together kids are coming up with all sorts of funny things, like hoverboards and skateboards and rollerblades and parachutes. And they're just kind of thinking of all the ways they can think of that people get from point A to point B. And then we go, hey, what's really crazy is seeds also travel. And so by asking questions that more kids might have prior experience around, we open up the playing field for everyone to get involved. All right, then there are multiple modalities. And the idea here is just that people learn in so many different ways. And so the more variety we can infuse, the better, not only for English learners, but really for all of our students. So perhaps some of your lesson is verbal, but then make sure that some other parts of it are visual. Make sure some parts are intrapersonal, where they're getting to talk and interact with one another. And that some parts are interpersonal, where they're getting some alone time to reflect or do a journal or something. You can bring in music and body kinesthetic learning, which is like physical, moving your bodies, and naturalist, where they're actually connecting with the natural world, and logical, mathematical, measuring and counting. And the more variety we have, it's not that every lesson has to have every modality, but the more variety we have, the more on-ramps we have for students to go, oh, now I know what's going on. You know, like, oh, the song is where you got me. Oh, the measuring with rulers is where you got me. Oh, it was when I got to talk to my friend next to me that I got on board. So it's just kind of different on-ramps for the same content. You can probably all think of examples of these from the lesson you just saw. So I really intentionally tried to get in there body stuff and musical stuff and verbal and the written, writing the words, and intrapersonal, where because you were connecting in the chat, so you're getting to share with each other the things that you eat and that kind of thing. All right, a few more. Making language accessible. You probably noticed on the first lesson with no scaffolding, I was speaking really quickly, and that was on purpose, and a lot of people noted it in the Jamboard, like felt rushed. It's really important that we slow our rate of speech. I feel a little bit like a, what's that word? A hypocrite saying it, because I think I'm talking a mile a minute right now. So it's important for people like me to take a breath and slow down. Again, this is good for everyone. So if you're speaking a different language than your students, this really helps them, but also everyone can understand better when we kind of calm down and slow it down a little bit. Providing sentence starters. The sentence starter on this slide here is we have these built right into our science curriculum from LifeLab, and this is why, because we found that many more students are comfortable participating when we give them the sentence starter. We don't give them the content, they're coming up with their own content, but we're giving them the sentence frame. And then highlighting cognates, which are words that sound similar in different languages. So in our case, things like cauliflower, cauliflor, or flores, flowers, you know, looking for those opportunities to highlight words that might be similar in students' home languages. That won't always be relevant. It depends on what their home language is. I'm sure everyone can probably relate to the experience where you tell students like, okay, we're gonna do this and this and this and this, go. And they're like, what are we doing? And what that comes from, usually in my experience, is giving too many directions at once. And so one key strategy is to go one step at a time. So this is a perfect example in this recipe. We're going to make 6 plant part burritos, or we're going to make salad. But first, I'm just going to show you how to wash and chop a lettuce leaf. And then we're going to do that. Next, we're going to wash and pick the stems off the tomatoes. And we all do that. So just kind of one thing at a time allows for easier, like I focused on paying attention and now I can apply the task before moving on to the next one. And then using modeling for all the tasks. So if there's something I want you all to do, rather than just tell you verbally, I can demonstrate it. And so this is a quick little 8-second example from our science lessons. This one's in 2nd grade about seed dispersal. The students all made seed samaras, the little flying part of the seed that can help it fly. And watch how the instructor demonstrates with them, rather than just verbally telling them, now throw it into the air. He demonstrates with them for the students to do. Simple example, but essentially, anytime I want my students to do something, I demonstrate it. So I'll just get right up out of my seat and say, okay, now we're gonna go find a plant in the garden. You're gonna pick a leaf, you're gonna bring it back here, and you're gonna put it on the paper. And I just by showing them with my body, they can follow along whether or not they understood my words. Oh, hang on. And then diversifying ways that students can demonstrate their knowledge. So rather than always saying at the end, okay, what did you learn today? Raise your hand to share. Looking for different ways they might be able to demonstrate what they learned. So for example, maybe it's by drawing a picture and connecting the lines, or in the lesson I just taught you, it's going and gathering objects from the garden and putting them onto the poster that has all of our words and connecting roots to roots and stems to stems. They don't, in that case, they don't even have to use the language for me to see, okay, she knows what flowers are, and oh, he does not understand that seeds are different from roots, you know, I can just see it. Here's another really short little video, just showing an example of a less formal way that students are demonstrating knowledge and practicing their English.
Oh, I know why it's a circle. Because it's going around. No, it's a life cycle.
Oh, there's a little toy in there too. But just giving students, in this case, their opportunity to show what they learned about life cycles is by taping actual living materials into a cycle and then explaining it. Oh, hang on, I'm gonna do it again. And then we always look for opportunities to spiral back to things, summarize and extend their learning. So you learned about the 6 plant parts, and now we're going to revisit that while we make 6 plant burritos. And now we're going to revisit that while we're in the classroom cooking activity, making our salad, and we're going to talk about which part of the plants each part came from. So always looking for, you know, opportunities to spiral back and reinforce the learning. All right. What we're going to do next, well, I have to say, I love this idea, but I think we should probably do Q&A. So I'm going to tell you about this idea because I think this is a good idea for any of you who are inspired by these ideas and want to apply them. With your colleagues, what I would do is take that handout that I put the link in the chat, so you have the same 10 components handout, and think of a specific lesson that you teach that you would like to make better for English learners, and go through these 10 strategies and look for opportunities. You know, oh, here's where we could add a sentence starter, or here's where we could add a visual aid, or here's how could we connect to prior knowledge? Let's add a question here. So I think that would be a great way to apply these strategies to a specific lesson that you have. But for now, because you did submit questions and I want to get to those, I think we're going to dive into the Q&A. So the way this will work is I have some questions here that came up in the registration form. So we'll start with those, and then with the remaining time, we can take any questions that John jotted down from the chat. So the first question here is how to support emergent language learners in remote learning. And if it's okay with you, Daniela, I'll start with you on that question because I know you've been doing some of that, and then I can tap in. Sound good?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good, Whitney. So, yeah, remote learning has really got us to get creative, and we're continually asking ourselves, well, how do we do this in remote learning, and how do we do that, and how do we translate this? So thinking about remote learning for our partner school programs that we've been working with, I would say we've been using and we've been trying to use these same strategies. So I would say, like, pick the ones that would work on the screen. And maybe in the beginning, we would think that like only a few work, but as we try, really a lot of them can work through the screen. So as we've been teaching remotely, when we can provide translations, we provide translations. We can, as we talk, and on the slides, we also like put some words in Spanish, put the word in English, and put the word in Spanish. So we do use translations. And it's also important to remember that kids are actually learning English. So we want to give them the support, but we also want to keep teaching them English so that they become familiar with the language. So I would say, like, use translation if you have it available, but also remember that kids are learning Spanish. So we don't want to give a whole lesson in Spanish for kids. It's supporting them in Spanish. And we found that doing some plant and animal movements work really well. So having kids move their bodies, and we experience that in Whitney's lesson right now, that has worked really well. Kids have been really engaged. We've been doing some plant yoga, for example, where we stretch and reach for our roots, and we raise our leaves towards the sun. So lots of moving in the lesson has been really helpful. Being mindful of our speaking pace, as Whitney mentioned, like slowing down, just remembering and continuously practicing that Modeling, we've been doing lots of modeling when we ask kids to go find seeds in their house or a leaf. And so we model this. We say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go look for a leaf. So we really do a lot of modeling. We've been using lots of visuals as we teach, and that's something that we can do remotely. We can have lots of visuals, we can have videos, we can have images of everything we're talking about. And yeah, giving kids the chance to express themselves in Spanish, in whichever language they feel comfortable with. We've been talking about how important it is for us to tell kids that they can type in the chat in whichever language they feel comfortable with. We have been using some polls in Spanish or in both languages. Singing, lots of singing, so including songs in English and in Spanish. That has been very engaging for kids. So those are some of the strategies that I can think of right now. Do you have anything to add, Whitney?
No, I don't think so. That's great. I guess I'll just add that for the specific lesson that I demonstrated, I want to highlight that when we do that in our field trips, for each part, we say, oh, I eat roots. Do you eat roots? Turn to a partner and share. And so it's a pair share. And today was actually the first time I've tried it with this particular lesson where I said, write them into the chat. And so that's just an example of, I was really wanting to get that intrapersonal intelligence or modality. I was wanting kids to get to interact and to connect with foods they already know in whatever language they wanted, but I had to kind of translate it to make it work on Zoom. And so that's an option, was in that case was using the chat. Yeah. All right, thanks, Daniela. This next question is, what does this look like with middle and high school? And I saw someone in the chat also just asked, like, when do kids stop wanting to do movement like that? And I would say with middle and high school, the same exact strategies apply. So those same things about creating an emotionally safe learning environment, using multiple modalities, et cetera, those 10 strategies, but they obviously have to look really different. And so, for example, if we want to get a kinesthetic, a movement-based activity, we want to get one that they will go for, and they're probably not going to go for the 6 plant parts, maybe, but in this case, it might look like finding a TikTok video that's exciting to them, or doing more of a, we're gonna run and then check our pulse, or, you know, something like that, where it's it's something that's more age appropriate, but the same strategy applies. So one place to consider some of those strategies is not when I was doing the demo lesson, but the whole rest of this workshop. There were some strategies that I would say work well with middle and high schoolers. So things like using a Jamboard and giving students the opportunity to express their opinion. So you might set up an opinion line and, you know, we just read this book. Do you think that the gardener did the right thing or wrong thing? And put it on the Jamboard, what you think and why, and putting them into breakout rooms to discuss. Middle and high schoolers are so into themselves and each other. I was a middle school science teacher, so I feel qualified to say, and any opportunity we give them to talk about themselves, their experience, and to talk with their peers boosts their engagement. So I would say things like Jamboards and breakout rooms and Kahoots, things where they can interact and show their thinking with one another, can be really powerful for them. But even singing and movement, et cetera, can be, if we find the things that they'll be willing to go for. And often it's the middle and high schoolers themselves that are going to help you figure out which are those things, which are those music videos that you're actually going to, like, you know, let me show and dance to. How does this look with families is actually a really similar answer. I think the stuff that I demonstrated just in the wraparound lesson of, you know, putting people into small groups to discuss things, providing translation when relevant, or sentence starters and supports, all of that can help with adult learners as well as with children. So if we actually just go back, hang on one second, or I can just go do it here. So again, looking at these 10 strategies, they're really the same for adults as for kindergartners, but it looks different. It's just about the level of sophistication. So I still slow my rate of speech when I'm talking to adults, ideally, if I can help myself. I still try to break things up into small steps, because adults are probably worse than kids about that, at being like, what are we talking about? So one thing at a time. I still demonstrate activities. Okay, now we're gonna wrap the tortilla, and I just show it. All of this is still relevant. A couple of just little little questions that we can answer quickly. Places to find bilingual resources. I'm going to just paste into the chat a couple of places. Everyone else, feel free to paste in there if you have other places to look, but we've compiled some Spanish language resources, not just from LifeLab, but from around the world on our website. And then we have some videos at backpocketlearning.org. And there you can also contribute videos there. So if you have videos in English or Spanish, but if you want to contribute some videos for distance learning, that's a great place to do that. Multilingual signs and labels. People just asked about these. I think they're a great idea. John, if you're able to, maybe you can put into the chat. I know you have a blog post about like sign materials and things like that, but I love coming into gardens where I can see lots of languages represented, and signs and labels is a great place because you know, if I was going to teach in 60 languages, that would take a really long time and a lot of kids would tune out. But to have the big welcome sign in all 60 languages, why not? You know, so I love that idea of having signs and labels in all the different languages that our students speak. And then I'm going to come back to this one because it's just so big, and I want to just where to find lesson plans. I'll put into the chat, or actually, John, maybe you can put into the chat places to find lesson plans. LifeLab has great lesson plans, and as I've mentioned, we have our new NGSS curriculum that's really exciting for K2, but we also have a list of on our website of like all these different curricular resources where you can look for different resources depending on what you're looking for. And then this last one I'll get at is expanding beyond translation toward culturally responsive teaching. Someone asked us in the registration, and I would say that in a nutshell, one place we can really all do that is by trying to have our students' cultures and home experiences represented in our garden programs. And one thing that I've found really intriguing recently is to look at how do we do that without making assumptions. So for example, at first I thought, oh, okay, I can do that. Like we'll have a salsa garden because we have a lot of students from Mexico. And then an educator that I work with, who's Latina, she's not from Mexico, I think she's from Uruguay actually, but she said, well, actually, you know, I don't know that all your students eat salsa, and that would really be better to ask them as a question. And they might have different salsas that might have different ingredients than what you have in this bed here. These are such good points. And so now instead of saying, oh, you know, if you work with students from Mexico, put in a salsa bed, or if you work with students from Italy, put in a pizza bed. It's not, we just say, ask your students, ask your families, what crops do you grow, or what foods do you eat most traditionally, and what would you like to see growing in the garden? And giving the students the opportunity to contribute ideas and be part of the planning of what goes into the garden is one of the best strategies for making the garden itself inclusive and culturally responsive, is by making sure that they have a voice in making those decisions. There's so much more to that. Those are, you know, that's a whole other webinar series, but that's one thing that I think dovetails really nicely with the topic today. All right, we're just about at time. I think what I'll do is I would be happy to answer questions that came up in the chat. I also want to let you all off the hook if you're ready to be finished. So I'll conclude it here. You're welcome to sign off now, but if you had a question and you were hoping to hear an answer, I'm happy to stay on and John can kind of share those questions. So thanks everybody. Feel free to sign off and stick around if you have any questions, and Daniela and I can try to answer them. Thanks everybody.
I have a question. Can you?
And so Whitney,
yeah.
There was a question, a couple of them were addressed in your larger questions, but so Emily Orion asked, what about student partner strategies for students that need language support, or student-led strategies for them to...
Can you say it again? So student partner support?
Partner strategies for students that need language support.
Yeah.
Student-led strategy.
I have found, and Daniela, feel free to chime in here, I have found it to be really effective to put a lot of time into which students I pair. I found that I would spend a ton of time thinking about which students are going to be at a table together, which students are going to be elbow partners, and that allows for, within the context of language learning, that allows for example, if I have a newcomer student and I have a bilingual student, that bilingual student can provide translation. Or if I have a student who I really want them to work on listening, I can put them with a more extroverted student. So just kind of thinking through those dynamics so that the students can really, you can intentionally set them up to support one another. And probably one of the best examples of that is making sure that if you have bilingual students, you're placing them with monolingual, non-English speakers so that they can help them follow along.
Yeah, and I'm really glad this question was asked, because that's a huge part of the support that language learners can have. And I had that experience as an English language learner. So really, like, you as a teacher being supported by the other students and taking that time to make it work, as Whitney was saying.
Yeah. John, did you get any other questions in there? Or it looks like someone has a question too.
I have a
Yeah.
question. Do you know any kind of like a vegetable seeds or flower seeds to grow fast at this season?
Where are you? I mean, I would say radish is my just go-to answer for growing fast, but I don't know where you are and if it will grow right now in your season.
Oregon.
Yeah, in general, and John, feel free to chime in, but in general, I think of radish as like a go-to for a quick start. I don't know if it'll grow right now because it's so cold. John?
Yeah, and leafy greens, radish and leafy greens, you just have to worry about predators and slugs and snails and things that might eat your leafy greens.
In the winter, especially. Yeah.
Good.
Great.
Thank you.
John, were there any other questions in there? And people are also, Shurong, I hope I'm saying that right.
Yes, right.
People are also putting some answers into the chat for you. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, there were no more specific lessons or questions added. People sharing ideas and resources. People wanted to know if we can make a list of all the websites that people shared and emailed. And yes, in the share out on the SGSO website, where we have our webinars page, we will have supporting resources along with a copy of this presentation, PDF of this presentation, and the recording of this presentation. And I have been looking at the links that people have been sending, and if they're relevant, I will add them.
Perfect. All right. Well, if anybody has a question, feel free to let us know, and otherwise we'll sign off. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's just great being with you today. Appreciate your participation.
Gracias a todas y todos.
Gracias a ustedes por su excelente presentación. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego. Gracias a usted.
Gracias.
So I will end it for everyone. And then Daniela and Whitney, if you guys want to debrief, if you have time right now, we can, or we could. Nice thumbs up and a thumbs up. Okay, well, I will end it and connect with you guys another way via phone or another Zoom. Goodbye, everyone.